Madam Deputy Speaker, instead of tackling violence against women, the government has prioritised giving the police the power to prohibit the fundamental freedoms of protest that the British public hold dear. And by giving the police this discretion to use these powers some of the time, it takes away our freedom all of the time. The government's bill targets protesters causing too much noise and says that those who cause annoyance could be jailed for up to 10 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm thankful that the draconian limits on the power to protest were not in place during the great protests of the 20th century that led to real change. When the suffragettes marched for the right to vote, some of them were prepared to break the law to make their point just outside the House of Commons. Does the Secretary of State believe that those women who shouted noisily should have been arrested too? Protesters marched from Jarrow in Tyneside all the way to London to demand the right to work in 1936. Does the Secretary of State think the police should have had the power to stop them before they even passed York? The anti-apartheid movement, of which I was part, marched continuously on Trafalgar Square for black and white people to be treated as equal. Does the Secretary of State seriously believe that they should have been arrested because they caused an annoyance? Throughout Britain's history, protest has been a fundamental method for the public to voice dissent. Pandemic aside, what about society has changed exactly? That means the police need more powers to control protests today than they did yesterday. And what about the images of police tackling a mourning woman to the floor last weekend makes him think the police do not have enough as it stands? The truth, as has been briefed to his favourite newspapers, is that it is introducing these measures because it dislikes Black Lives Matter, because it hates Extinction Rebellion, because both tell too many hard truths. The Conservative Party's principles are rooted in liberty and against the overreach of the state. I call on every member of the governing party who still believes in freedom to join with the opposition and vote against this bill tonight. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not only those who cause annoyance that the government thinks should be locked up for a decade. It's also those who damage statues of slave owners. Madam Deputy Speaker, unlike the government, the opposition will never condone criminal behaviour, but this government's priorities are backwards, they're upside down. Unlike women, memorials are mentioned in this bill 8 times. The government thinks people who damage statues should spend up to 10 years in prison because of their emotional value, but it's fine with 5-year sentences for rape. This is not a hypothetical. Anthony Williams strangled his wife to death, but only received a 5-year sentence. John Patrick raped a 13-year-old girl, but only got 7 years in jail. Fernando Orlando and Lorenzo Constanzo were jailed for 7.5 years for raping a woman in a Soho nightclub. James Reeve raped a 7-year-old disabled girl, but only got 9 years. And David Nicholson raped an 11-year-old, but was given a sentence of 9 years and 4 months. What does this bill do to address those injustices that many people feel?
Nothing. Why are you all quiet now?
The government would rather blow a dog whistle against minorities than make women safe.
Absolutely.
Measures in the bill will further compound the inequalities experienced by gypsies and travellers, who are already the most disproportionately represented group in the justice system. Those found guilty of trespass in this bill could receive a higher sentence than someone convicted of stalking. Once again, this government's priorities are skewed. Police forces do not even support the government's criminalisation of trespass. The National Chief Police Council and the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners said trespass is a civil offence, and our view is that it should remain so. Why is this government determined to lock up gypsies and travellers, even against its own police's advice? Madam Deputy Speaker, many of the other measures in this bill will compound the biases he knows exist in the justice system. But Labour cannot vote for a police and crime sentencing and courts bill that ignores the intimidation, violence and abuse women face. We cannot vote for this bill when it fails to increase sentencing for rape and stalking. We cannot vote for this bill when it fails to criminalise street harassment. We cannot vote for this bill when it fails to make misogyny a hate crime. We cannot vote for this bill when it fails to give whole life orders to those found guilty of abduction, serious assault and murder of a stranger on his watch. And we cannot vote for a bill when it fails to outline a strategy to tackle the culture of misogyny that underpins it.